Thanks for coming into our office. I know it was a long trip. Where'd you come in from?
I'm from Dallas, so we're based in Dallas,
So
Texas.
you just flew up Dallas to here just for fun?
Oh no, just come see you guys. Come see you guys.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Love the support we're getting from you guys too. And basically, we wanted to make something up, just a little talk a bit about your company, how it can benefit shippers, just the big overview, even where the market's heading as well too. So maybe first, I mean, there's a ton of challenges going on with double brokering and fraud in the market. Like, why was Highway formed, and like what's it going to do to help us so we can try to avoid this or at least eradicate a lot of the double brokering and fraud?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in software development and in banking, and so on the banking side, what's interesting to me is we have. Imagine you went to a bank and you wanted to borrow $250,000, right? Bank's going to know everything about you, right? They don't just hand you the money and let you walk out the door. It's KYC or an underwriting process. And what was interesting to me is I was running TriumphPay prior to this. We would get calls from brokers being like, "Hey, stop payment on this load. Don't pay that carrier." And it, maybe ask the question, why? What happened? What that you don't want to pay the carrier anymore? Didn't they deliver the load? And that's where I started to uncover. Okay, they didn't want you to pay it because it got double brokered, or they're holding it hostage, or something's happening. And it led me to like, okay, well, how do we prevent it from happening here? How do we go upstream of what's before the payment, right? How do we prevent them from even getting on the load and getting in the network at all? And that led me to like doing some investigation about what the underwriting process looked like in the freight broker community. And I just saw this opportunity to bring some of the standards that we're used to in the financial services world and bring that to light for brokers so they can see who's really hauling their freight. There's 380,000 roughly carriers that have interstate motor carrier authority in the U.S.
Right.
And what I talk to people about a lot is what's scary about that number is there's nowhere near that many carriers actually running in the U.S., right? From the data we saw when I was running TriumphPay on the payment side, from the data we see on the insurance stuff we work on at Highway, it's nowhere near 350,000 carriers. And so what we tell people is having carrier authority doesn't make you a carrier. We want to help brokers have transparency into who they're really about to put that load on with, so that it's preventative care, prevents bad things from getting in your network at all. And yeah, it may be more painful on the front end, but what we're trying to do is weed out the sheep from the wolves, right? And it's hard because, as you know, like there's not a lot of transparency today, and trying to bring transparency into that market, we do get pushback at times from carriers. But what we're slowly seeing is carriers see that Highway's not here to make their life harder, not here to take advantage of them. We don't charge them money. We're not trying to take money out of their pocket. We're trying to bring the good ones to the surface. And so if we do that, then the brokers want to work with the carriers that provide that transparency. And it's a cycle that's going to make this industry better and get rid of a lot of this nonsense that's going on today.
Hey, that's exactly what's needed. I mean, the whole thing with double brokering and fraud, this has been around for a long time. But like, when did it all accelerate to the point where we're at today? Because it's horrible right now what's going on.
Yeah, so if you think about fraud, or just specifically freight fraud needs three things to survive. So like fire needs heat, it needs fuel, and it needs oxygen. And so when you try and put out a fire, you try and put out one of those three or two of those three things to extinguish a fire. Fraud needs anonymity, needs urgency, and it needs the prospect of gain. So the prospect of gain is pretty easy, right? You got a $200,000 load and you're paying someone $2,000 to run it for you. There's a big upside if they do something nefarious. The urgency, freight, and especially the broker freight community, there's a ton of urgency. Hey, this needs to pick up today. It needs to pick up in 2 hours, right? There's a lot of that urgency that allows for that just creates a greater opportunity for fraud to occur. And then the anonymity, right? A lot of what we deal with when we're working with carriers is over email or phone, or they found us on the public load board. And so we're trying to pierce the veil on the anonymity and let you see who's really on the other side of that transaction. And so those three things together, okay? Those three things together is what's led to this explosion of fraud over the last 18 months. 20 years ago, you didn't have the same level of urgency. 20 years ago, you weren't able to move carriers through your network as fast as you were. 20 years ago, it wasn't that the shippers weren't as demanding about, hey, I want this to pick up in 2 hours or 4 hours, and expecting that you would get that done for them. So this industry's kind of led itself to this point where you've created so much efficiency and speed in the transaction that now, combined with the anonymity, there's just a ton of opportunity for people that aren't even in the U.S. or Canada.
Right.
They're overseas. They've never set foot in the U.S., but they have U.S. carrier authority, and they're able to make themselves appear like they're a motor carrier.
Wow. So do you see it getting worse? Like, I mean, we're coming into 2024. 2023 has been a crazy year. I mean, we've all had horror stories. I mean, our company, we've seen aspects of fraud take place just within our own company with carriers. What's it going to look like for 2024? Do you have thoughts as to, is it going to get worse? Are we going to slowly start seeing things mellow out a bit? Or is this a problem that's here to stay?
Yeah, I'd say let's talk about the market as a whole, and then talk about highway brokers specifically.
Okay.
So the market as a whole, yes, like there continues to be increases in not only stolen loads, but like the double brokering, the load fishing. All of that is continuing to increase because there is still opportunity for criminals to create financial gain for themselves. With highway brokers, we've seen on average across all the brokers that use us a 97% reduction in fraudulent activity with highway.
That's huge.
And so it's made a huge difference for a lot of brokers, saving them not only the losses, right? Not only the financial losses of having to pay the deductible on a stolen load or double pay on a double brokered load, but also the reputational damage, right? You think about a stolen load, it's not just paying the deductible. That shipper, you're impacted that shipper's business. And that's 10 times more expensive than the financial cost. And that's where you lose the customer, because they say, okay, maybe sure, your insurance covered the cost of the load, but I missed out on the sales opportunity, right? The goods that I needed to get out to the retailer's distribution center or the wholesaler's distribution center didn't make it. And so I didn't get that revenue opportunity. So, you've negatively impacted their business. So we talk a lot about highway, about owning the outcome. And so highway, we're not just a software provider. We don't just say, hey, here's our software, take it and use it. Good luck SPI, good luck SPI agents. Let us know how it goes. Like when something bad happens in your network, I mean, we care deeply. We want to engage, and we're going to help you figure out what happened and how we prevent it from happening again, and if we can help in the recovery. And today we've been very successful in helping brokers that have had something bad happen recover, and then also like preventing it from happening to other brokers.
Okay. So, like, I mean, a lot of this is all following on 3PL companies like ourselves and even our competitors. It's happening to them. But I'm finding, talking to shippers, I don't think they really see how bad it actually is out there. I think they're just relying on the brokers to deal with the problem and to ensure they're putting a carrier that's reputable and is going to move it from point A to point B in a timely manner and communicate along the way. Like, what can shippers do? Like, how do we educate shippers, and what should be our message to shippers about utilizing tools like Highway to help us?
Yeah, absolutely. So Highway, we only sell to freight brokers. We believe deeply that we serve one. You can't have two masters. You can't serve two masters, right? So
Right.
Some people in the freight tech industry like to serve brokers, and then they take the broker's data and they go sell it to shippers. They take their customers' data and go sell it to their customer's customer, and we don't do that. But what we do, and what we have, we probably have a half dozen, if not 10 shippers now that they wanted to use Highway. Say, hey, you can't. We only serve brokers. But if you want to use brokers that use Highway, like you should do that. And so we have some shippers now, some big ones that say, hey, brokers that are in my network, if you're not using Highway, you're not going to be invited back to the bid season, because they see the benefit of having a tool like Highway that's looking across 400 brokers for fraud and fraud events to protect their freight. And so it's creating more opportunities for highway brokers and that's what we're looking forward to in 2024 is we want to create a program where we can help brokers that are using Highway stand out. Like they're going the extra double, because it's harder to do this right. It's harder because you don't just hire every carrier that comes through and says, hey, I'm a carrier, I want this load. So you're doing more work. You should be rewarded for that. And you should be rewarded for that by having more opportunities with shippers and being able to tell shippers, hey, we don't just hire any carrier that shows up, that sends an email. And we don't just take any email and trust that it's the carrier they claim to be. We take these additional steps. We verify them with MFA. We make sure that they have presence in the U.S. And if they have some red flags, we make sure we can see their ELD before we hire them to know that we're not just booking something in the dark. We can see the truck that we're about to put it on.
Perfect. So, so as a shipper, what questions should a shipper be asking a broker before he does business with them?
Yeah. I think the first question is, what does it look like for your carrier on with your carrier vetting process? Like,
Okay.
what are the tools that you're using to vet carriers today? The second thing I think you can ask is around should be asking is around how are you protecting the rate confirmation and pickup information, right? Because if a lot of this load phishing, they're not even onboarding; they're just trying to get you to send the rate confirmation to some email address that they control while pretending to be this carrier over here. And so that's where with the Outlook plugin and being able to look up emails in Highway, but also having Highway be able to send the rate confirmation for you, make sure it gets where it needs to go. That's the second thing I would say to a shipper is like, how is your pickup information being protected? Because if that becomes compromised, number one, doesn't matter. If they have the pickup number, they're gonna be able to steal that load. And number three, I would say, is how do they think about this holistically in terms of reporting, in terms of their business, right? You have a network. SPI has this network, and it's our job to be the firewall for your network and prevent bad traffic from getting in. Now, what can happen is that can slow down some good actors. Some good carriers may look bad on the outside because of some choices or some things, the factors out of their control.
Right.
But that is a part of any filter, is you've got to continue to refine that so the good carriers have a great experience and get through while keeping out the bad actors and that are going to cause problems. So if I'm a shipper, I'm asking those three questions of my brokers.
Perfect. So like even a shipper, what can a shipper do to work with a broker to try to help? I mean, is there a communication flow that should be happening when there's a load confirmation sent out, and the communication between a shipper and broker to help them alleviate some of these challenges when the carrier shows up on the dock and ready to pick up their cargo?
Yeah, I think for a shipper, like, they want to know that the broker that they're using has these processes in place to make sure that there's protection of their confidential information. It's confidential information, that pickup number, that pickup information. That information, they need to know that a broker is doing the right things to protect it, like SPI. Like, you guys are using Highway to make sure that once you have that valuable information, it's only going to not only the right carrier, but a carrier that would meet the standards of SPI that you're willing to send in to go pick up that load. We talk about this a lot. As a freight broker, you don't actually get to show up and own you don't actually physically there, right?
Right.
Your carrier that you're sending in is the extension of your brand, right? So we talk about that a lot. Like, is this someone that you want representing your brand at your customers or at your customers' dock, right? And so that's why this preventative care is so important. And that's why working with carriers that are willing to provide transparency is so important, because if they're willing to go through the process and they're willing to do things right, then that is going to save you so much headache and pain on the back end of, maybe they don't just steal the load, maybe they don't double broker, but maybe they give your shipper a really bad experience.
And trying to get out of that is hard.
Yeah, exactly.
So like the process with Highway with trying to weed out these carriers, what are some of the things that are the milestones or safety points that you guys check out to verify a carrier?
Yeah, so we think about risk in a matrix. So this is my background in banking. When you think about risk, you think about here's high risk, low risk, and there's all kinds of factors along the way that can make you look high risk. So there's this basic principle we use at Highway. There are two kinds of people in the world. They're good guys and bad guys. Very simplistic.
Simple things.
All right, but here's the difference. So how do you tell the difference between a good guy and a bad guy? Well, bad guys don't want to leave footprints. And so a lot of what we do in Highway is, if we can't see footprints, right? Because if you leave footprints at the scene of crime, you're going to get caught. The same is true with people that are trying to commit freight fraud, as they are trying to hide and obfuscate their identity. And so as what we do through our process is identify high risk carriers and say, hey, like, give them the chance to offer us the visibility to know that they're a great carrier and a good carrier. And if they do, they're going to pass their flying colors. And a lot of that is around, mobile phone verification. It's around ELD verification. It's around, insurance, and making sure all those things are aligning, telling the same story. And if that's happening, they're going to make it through great. There's about 140 to 150,000 carriers that are approved, passing the rules, insurance on file,
right,
ready to go in Highway. But now, the carriers that don't want to do that, that's your warning sign. That's the sign of, like, if they're not willing to show and give you that transparency, if they're not willing to give it to you before you give them the load, why would they give it to you after?
Makes sense. So like thinking about, say, let's just delve deeper now into our business now. We're talking with our agents, and
Yeah.
yes, we're on Highway. Yes, there's hiccups with any type of new software that comes in. And I think our agents want to know, I see the potential as this is a huge selling feature as to what we've invested in technology wise into highway to protect our customers. So how can our agents use this as a tool, as a selling tool to give, peace of mind to their customers and also to help them get other customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about freight brokers, right? There's 8,000 freight. There's 30,000 registered freight brokers in the U.S. There's about 8 to 10,000 active. So how do you stand out? So when you're talking to your customer, how do I stand out as SPI or an agent of SPI? Well, one of the ways that you talk about what the shippers care about is service and stability, right? Those are two components that they care about in their supply chain. You are literally being given the keys to their revenue cycle, right? And so when you show up and say, hey, at SPI, we don't just make it easy we don't just let anyone get in, right? We want to make sure that we're working with high quality vetted carriers. And if they're high quality vetted carriers, yeah, they can get in really easy, but we make sure shippers that we are taking the security of your freight seriously. We care about the outcome for you as a shipper, not just, hey, what's the cheapest carrier we can find to get this load moved. And that, I think, is what separates the high quality brokers and agents like SPI from a lot of these people who, are just trying to make a dollar and putting risk. You got to think about the risk that can be put on that shipper's business. And talking as an agent and you're talking to your customer, that shipper, you want to be communicating that you're not just taking the easy way out. You're here to think about the long term and building long term relationship by executing day in, day out and using high quality providers to get them great results.
I fully agree. I mean, I see it though. You have a carrier that's a few $100 less. It's like, oh yes, there's my potential to make a little bit more money. But coming along with that's also risk. And the customers, they're asking like, well, yeah, they're still about rates. Trust me, a lot of customers are still about rates. What's the rate going to be? And I think we need to say like, hey, yes, they have this carrier that's a couple $100 less. But I'll tell you what, how he shows up in the system, I have some reservations about it. This carrier, for instance, is a few $100 more, which is actually more in line with what the market rate is. But I feel comfortable with this carrier. This carrier is going to do a good job. We're not going to have any transactional issues. We're going to have open communication with them. So I think there's that segregation that we got to segregate and also sell it to our customers that way.
Yeah, and there's so many sayings around this. Stepping over a dollar to pick up a dime, right? And you think about you're putting at risk potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of freight on that load, and not only that, but the relationship with that shipper to save a couple $100. And we talk about this a lot during our training process with customers. Is carrier authority does not make you a carrier. And no longer, that doesn't work anymore. There's too many shell MC numbers out there. I mean, there are tens of thousands of shell MC numbers out there that are just sitting dormant, that people have registered that aren't actually motor carriers. And we need to do more to make sure that who we're about to hire is actually a true carrier, has the equipment they say they do, the equipment is insured, and that they're actually going to show up and do what you need to do. And a big part of that is the willingness to provide transparency. And I can't emphasize it enough that if we're thinking about building long-term value for your agents and for SPI, we need to think about service level through the cycles. We need to think about carrier usage through the cycle. Absolutely, today shippers are more rate sensitive. That's going to change someday soon, and we want to make sure that we think about what we're doing through these cycles and building long-term value for SPI's agents and SPI, whether it's a down market or up market. And one area that we don't want to compromise on is the quality of the carriers that you're allowing in the SPI network, because that is brand, right? The carriers are an extension of your brand, and so we need to think about when we're bringing them into our network, are these brand ambassadors? Are these people that we do want representing our SPI or SPI agent brand at the dock of our customer?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Interesting enough too is the fact that a lot of, how do you say it here? These carriers, the good ones are going to give our customers a really good experience. The bad ones can leave things in a bad experience. But do you think there's value in our agents or just any broker, for instance, going to their customer and saying, listen, they go, what impact does a fraudulent, if your load is stolen, have on your business? Or, you know what, if you all of a sudden lose complete visibility of that load because it's been double brokered, how does that affect your business? And painting that ugly picture to a shipper that when these bad things happen, there's an impact to you.
Yeah, and I mean, each case is different, right? So for a CPG company, they have certain quotas and thresholds in delivery velocity. They have to keep up with the food retailers or the food distribution or the distribution, the wholesalers for those food retailers. If they don't meet that velocity, they're not keeping that amount of goods flowing when they've committed to deliver it. They're going to lose business. They're going to lose revenue, and it's not just. And again, like it's not just about replacing the cost. Maybe you replace the cost to retail. They don't book that as revenue. And every single one of them have investors. Every single one of them have financial reporting, and they're all trying to grow their revenue. And so with even just one truckload not getting to the Wegmans distribution center when it was supposed to, is going to negatively impact their quarter. 100% their quarter will be impacted by that. Now you're talking about 2, 3, 4 loads that get stolen. Now we have a real problem that now C-suite is going to be hearing about it at that shipper. It gets worse when you talk about like branded apparel, or you talk about things that are licensed goods, and you potentially have a customer that's in possession of another brand's licensed goods, like Nike apparel or some other branded apparel. If that truckload disappears, now your customer is involved. Right? Because now you have their product on the black market, you have their product going into flea markets, you have their product potentially going into, illicit distribution channels, maybe showing back up on Amazon and creating bad outcomes for consumers. And that's an even bigger issue for them reputationally. And so I think, again, it just comes back to like showing up and being a service provider that thinks about providing quality through the cycles. This will turn. I mean, this day will pass, right? There will be a strong market. The market will swing back the other way, and it will happen in the middle of the night when none of us expect it. Not even, my good friend Craig Fuller Freight was going to know, pretty able to predict it. Actually, the agents are probably the best at predicting it because they're so close to the metal. They're so close to the ground. They can feel it, right? But it'll come. And just keeping the discipline. There's certain disciplines that we need to refine and build that muscle in bad markets and good markets, and this is one, because this is when you think about the impact of a stolen load or impact of a hostage load, even if it gets delayed 2 days, like that, those impacts last forever. It takes, what does it say? It takes, reputation is gained by the inch and lost by the mile. It's consistent, continual execution that allows you to build that reputation, that brand, and then just one bad character, one bad actor can mess that up.
And that's the thing. I mean, this ties in nicely, man. We painted the big ugly picture of how this can affect our customer's business, and even their customer's customer.
Yeah.
All of over saving $200-300 on a load going with a carrier that's a low cost carrier. Like it doesn't. When you paint that ugly picture, all of a sudden the shipper is going to be like, yeah, you know what? I'd rather go with somebody a little bit more solid and reputable.
And then let's talk about, so we talk about, we use the term, I don't like to use the term carrier when we talk about the fraudulent actors. Like they have carrier authority, but they're not a carrier, right? The people out there, the carriers are actually running this freight. Like we want to create great outcomes for them as well. So like whenever carriers are willing to engage with highway and bring transparency, they find more business. They're going to find more brokers wanting to work with them because they're going to show up in more search results. We know that carriers that provide transparency or connect their ELD device, they show up in 20 times. They're 20 times more likely to show up in a search result than a carrier that doesn't in highway. Because brokers, tens of thousands of brokers
and not everyone's
use
good.
Highway sourcing every day, and they're seeing these carriers that are willing to provide transparency, and they're getting more freight. We talked to a carrier that's got 6 trucks. It's a reefer carrier out of the Midwest, and they were hesitant about connecting their ELD, and I ended up on the phone with them talking through it. They were like, why would we do this? I was like, here's why. We're doing this to protect you. So if someone tries to pretend to be you and picking up a load in Florida, it's not you. You don't run outside the Midwest, and we're going to help protect you there. The second is it's going to bring you to the surface. People want to work with people that provide transparency. And like whenever people are searching for reefer carriers in the Midwest, they now show up in the top 5 because they're providing that transparency. We want to reward them with great outcomes because they're great actors and because they are good people doing good work out there. And the third thing we talk about with them is, as a broker, you are, the broker prior to highway, before you could see the ELD data, before you could see where the carrier was, you're booking in the dark. Maybe you can go to Safer and see something, or maybe you got some data in your TMS, but you're booking in the dark. And we want that to go away. We want that to be a thing of the past. Or in the future, we have great carriers and great brokers working together, right? And like, there's going to be disputes. There's going to be frustration.
Of course,
It's just the natural order of things. But it brings the cream of the crop to the surface, and it leaves these fraudulent actors on both sides. There's fraudulent actors pretending to be brokers ripping off carriers, and there's fraudulent actors pretending to be carriers ripping off brokers. We need to get where those people aren't allowed inside the game, and so that the people that are doing good work, both brokers and carriers, can feed one another.
And that's the way it should be. I mean, there are brokers that shouldn't even be being. So, I mean, again. So let's talk a little bit about you guys are partnering now with the TIA, and I think that's great. Maybe talk a little bit about that partnership and what you guys are looking to accomplish. What are some of the goals of that?
Yeah, so our partnership with the TIA is around the Watchdog program. So the TIA Watchdog is a fraud reporting service the TIA has had around for probably 10, 15 years. And it was kind of put up on it wasn't getting a lot of love or investment. I think, you probably saw it before it got redone. And so they were losing adoption. Brokers weren't wanting to use it. And so what we did is we took about 6 months and worked with the TIA on redesigning it and providing a lot more value to brokers that are TIA members. So if you're a TIA member, you can log into TIAWatchdog.com with your official TIA email, and you get a lot more value than you did before. We're going to show you things like insights. We're going to show you a couple free looks at carriers and show you if we see their ELD data, what it is. We're going to give you a lot more information so that you are being able to protect yourself. And then what that leads to is that's where fraud reporting happens at the TIA. So we got 2,000, 2,500 member companies roughly with the TIA, and they're now using that more actively. I think we've seen 20 times more carrier views than was previously. We see a 30x increase in the number of fraud reporting, and that's really helping cut this stuff off before it gets legs. And a lot of that fraud reporting, Mike, is not, hey, my load got double brokered or stolen. It's catching it before it turns into where the email phishing campaigns are coming out. So these guys, these fraudulent actors pretending to be carriers, are emailing in, they'll email best1logistics@gmail.com, but they'll use a 1 instead of spelling out 1, which is the right email. And they're trying to get the broker to give them that load, pretending to be a carrier that's already in their network. And that's what's getting reported, and that's stopping the fraud from happening, because now that email's flagged. Every broker that uses TI Watchdog or Highway is now going to have visibility that email's compromised. Don't trust it.
Yeah, which is huge. So we're finding these ways here to try to weed this out, which I think is great. So, I mean, this seems like this is an evolving process for you guys. Like what we have now, you got to continue to evolve. So what are some of the things on the horizon for Highway, some of the new tools that we can probably expect coming out, and how are they going to benefit us?
Yeah. So we'll talk about tools for both brokers and carriers. Okay. So, we've spent a lot of time thus far building a lot of products from brokers. And why we did that is, one, that's where my relationships was with the freight broker community. The second was, we believe that if we can stop the fraud at that point in the cycle, we can prevent a lot of downstream fraud. And we've been able to do that. But the next step is we're rolling out a carrier product that's going to be free for carriers that are registered with Highway and providing transparency, that they're going to be able to go and see and look up brokers and see a lot of the same things that brokers get to see on carriers. And it's going to provide a lot of transparency about, where is this person actually accessing Highway from? Or, is this really the broker they claim to be? What kind of payment data have we been able to see on this broker? Like, they've had authority for 2 years, but no one's bought an invoice from them in 2 years. Like, what's going on? And provide a lot of that visibility to carriers so that they can vet the people that they're about to do business with. Additionally, we're going to provide a rate confirmation delivery tool for carriers and brokers, a secure way. It's available today. They can just use their MC number at gohighway.com, and they can be protected when people are sending them rate cons. Highway's going to tell them, that's not the broker it claims to be. They're trying to pretend to be another broker, or we don't know who that broker is. You should make them go verify their identity before you work with them. Those tools for carriers, I think, are going to help prevent a lot of fraud that they're facing today. My buddy, I told you this earlier, for instance, kindergarten, went to high school together. He runs 2 trucks out of West Texas. He got stung, and it impacted him personally, and there's nowhere for him to go. The dollar values are too low. It's not worth the time of going to, the collection agencies, because, he's like, it's just it's and he's stuck, and no one's helping him. And so that's where a lot of this inspiration for those carrier products come from, is how do we help carriers prevent bad stuff from happening to them in their networks before it gets in. So that's
enhanced carrier broker relations. The way this is going, I like that. I think it's beautiful. It's good stuff, and everyone's gonna win. It's gonna become a win-win for everybody if people partner up.
Yeah, and you know, that's why we try and be mindful. Like when we talk about the fraud, they're not carriers. They're pretending to be carriers. And when we talk about the fraud, they're not brokers. They're pretending to be brokers. And what's hurting the good actors, right? The bad apples are spoiling the whole lot. Is brokers are getting burned by these fraudulent actors pretending to be carriers, and carriers are getting burned by these fraudulent actors pretending to be brokers. And it's causing just reputational damage across this entire industry. Both these industries need each other, and there is great outcomes that can be had for all. And yes, there's going to be disputes along the way, and people are going to be frustrated, and there's miscommunication, and there's unmet expectations about when they thought they were going to be loaded versus not, and there are bad actions taken by both sides. But I think ultimately, the more that we can bring transparency and trust, the trust that I'm working with someone like SPI. So think about this, like a carrier that's been around in the business 6-9 months, never worked with an SPI. They may not know how big you are, right? And so part of what we want to do in Highway is expose to these small carriers. This is a big broker. That means they're creditworthy. That means reputationally they've been doing this a long time. Means they've been doing something right. And then 3, it's like they're going to have more freight for you. So you're willing to take that load. You want to go engage with them because they're going to have more freight.
And they don't have an active sales force out there selling their carrier services to the markets. For them partnering up with a broker could be a win-win for them.
Absolutely.
Huge win.
Absolutely. And with your agent model, what's great, I think, that we want to do a better job is showing to these carriers, to this carrier product is, hey, it's not just like SPI, this one broker. There's 60, 70, 80 agents out there that are out there hustling all day, every day, getting shipper freight. Like, come work with them because you got 60 at-bats. You got 60 salespeople out there for you now, out pushing freight for you. So we're going to work on like that messaging, and that's what we were working with you earlier. It's like, how do we communicate the value prop that these brokers that do good work and are paying carriers and are not trying to work people over? How do we raise that to the surface so carriers know where to go haul, know what brokers they should be working for?
Yeah, and that, like you said, that's a trust factor. So, all right, let's break it down a little bit right here. So, we have a great vetting tool utilizing Highway. Like brokers that don't have a vetting program, man. Like, what are some of the challenges and the risks that they're going to experience, kind of moving forward, or as they're seeing right now? Do you have any stories to share? Or
yeah, I mean the sophistication level is getting pretty incredible, right? It's getting, they are trying new things. So some of the things we see, one of the ones that I heard the other day,
like this stuff changes daily.
Yeah. And that's what I like, when people say like, oh, let's have a, you've got to move fast to keep up with these guys, because they don't have some committee where they're sitting around talking about, oh, what should we do? Or, they're trying stuff all day, every day. So some of the statistics, we see 200 reported phishing attempts per week.
Wow. That's crazy.
200. I mean, the scale of it is mesmerizing. That's 200. Sorry, that's not just 200 total. That's 200 unique email attempts.
Yeah. So
there's probably 1,000 or more with those same emails. So that's 200 unique emails that they've used to try and phish.
And it only takes one to get us.
It only takes one. They're playing for a lot of tickets. We're playing defense. So, one of the ones that was, the subtlety of it, the genius was in the subtlety of what they did. And these guys are this good. They got a carrier sales rep at a large broker, and they used a reasonably sized large carrier, 50 trucks. And they said, hey, I want that load that you posted on this load board. And hey, send the rate confirmation here. And they gave the domain that was the exact match for that carrier's email domain. It was, wow. They didn't try to spoof the email domain. It was a corporate domain. And they said, hey, email it to this user, C. Velasquez at this domain. And the carrier sales rep did the right thing, and he went and checked the domain. He sent the email. Didn't hear anything back. And then all of a sudden, an hour or 30 minutes after pickup was supposed to happen, he gets a call from someone pretending to be the driver and played the whole role. Frustrated, pickup number's not working. What did you do? This isn't the right pickup number. Give me the pickup number. What's the pickup number? I'm sitting here. I'm about to leave if I don't get this pickup number. And the carrier sales rep gave him the pickup number over the phone.
Wow.
And that's all it took. The carrier sales rep in his mind had sent it to the right place. So nothing was amiss to him, right? And he just assumed they hadn't responded. And then when that phone call came from the driver, in his mind, the continuation of the experience was, oh, yeah, how often does that happen, right? The driver doesn't get the pickup number or can't read the pickup number on the rate con because there's 80 numbers on there, right? And they fell for it and the load got stolen. Just like that. And they were smart enough to know they picked a company domain that didn't bounce back, right? See, that was a fake user at that company. So they sent that email to, carrier, C. Velasquez at carrierlogistics.com. That wasn't the domain. I don't want to say who the carrier was. But they knew that email wouldn't bounce back. So they tested it. Because, some email servers, you send it, there's no user there, it'll bounce back and say, no one here. And it's kind of a security thing. Some people decide not to do that or do that. So it was sophisticated. It was thought out. And the subtlety of that last move there where they call the carrier sales rep pretending to be the driver it's really good. It's scary good.
And they're going to come up with new tactics all the time, and they're going to keep on trying it.
Yeah.
So the rest of these smaller brokers that don't have a real vetting process in place or ways to alleviate this are going to have some challenges.
Yeah, you've got to be vigilant. You've got to be on your guard all the time. That's our job for you. We're your firewall. So every network has a firewall, and that's the tip of the spear that's out there trying to protect things from getting into the network. And that's what our job is. So we look at all this data coming in and we're looking at, how they're fishing for these loads. We're looking at what kind of loads they're fishing for. And we're tracking this data and it allows us to be proactive. And that's kind of the next step with the broker community is we're going to start providing you this proactive intelligence about where we think they're trying to strike or what loads we think they're going for. And that will help you be more high alert, right? So the key is focusing your energy on the high risk situations, right? So they're not stealing bottled water.
No.
Right, they're stealing bottled water.
They are stealing pickles. We had a pickle. Oh, that got stolen.
Right. They're not stealing bottled water loads, but they're targeting certain commodities that are either easy to move or high value or both.
Right.
And then they're targeting them in certain zip codes. There's just certain distribution centers.
What kind of areas then are they targeting right now?
Oh, we don't say that publicly.
Okay.
It's in highway, right? That's the job. We don't want to disclose what we know because then it'll shift their tactics, right? So we want to, as much as possible, withhold what we think we know, but deliver it to you in a way that in highway. That's why sometimes in highway you're like, why is this more challenging for this carrier? It's because there's something we're seeing about a pattern that we may not reveal to the carrier or reveal to the user, but we're testing out in the background to say, okay, let's try that to see if that stops some of this activity. And we've measured everything we do A/B testing where we're saying, hey, we're going to try it on this carrier, try it on that carrier and see what happens. And we've had some that yield great results that we don't publicly disclose what we know, that this pattern that we see, but it's running in the background if you're a highway broker and it's checking that. And, that will always be how we attack things. And then once something has become revealed or known, then we may publicly disclose what it was. But as long as we know it's working, we're not going to disclose it.
Good on you for not sharing with me.
Yeah.
So I know our agents probably a question that they may have is hey, I've been dealing with this carrier prior to highway. I've been dealing with this carrier for years. I know their kids. I know awesome, right? I know them well. And then all of a sudden they get onboarded into highway and they fail.
Yeah.
What's the challenge? Let's walk through that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So every firewall is goal is to only catch all the bad traffic and let all the good traffic come through. But in reality, there's an overlap, right? There's traffic that's gray. It's not all black and white. And what I would tell you is if you know that to be true, that's great. Get that carrier through. There is a process to bring them through with the overrides and maybe there's a story that needs to be told. And we're always receptive. We talk to carriers all the time. We're talking to carriers, trying to understand different situations, what's happening, and it's difficult because the wolves are in sheep clothing, right? They're hiding. They're trying to hide as a sheep, and they're trying to look like a carrier. So I would say there are absolutely nuanced situations, and we're always open to hearing and learning about it. I will say though that that is the lever that people try and pull. And there are dozens, if not 100 or more stories of brokers that have gone live with Highway that it's revealed something in their network that scares them a little bit. Like, we've been working with this carrier for how long and we didn't know this was going on.
There's the key there.
Yeah.
It could be stuff that we don't even know about. That it's something was you guys picked up, and that's where the red flag.
And we talk about and so we talk about green, yellow, red, right? And when you see those yellow flags, those insights, it's an opportunity for a conversation. It's an opportunity to have a conversation. Why, and we've been working together a long time. I didn't know you had broker authority. Or why is there broker authority 3 houses down from you? Or, can we talk about that? Like, well, you only got 1 truck on your scheduled auto, but you got 10 that have been inspected. Are these leased on carriers, leased on drivers, or are these your drivers, right?
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to arm you with a conversation. And that's worth so much, because when you show up to a conversation with information to be able to ask really good questions, you're going to find out whether you push on a nerve that, man, maybe there was something going on that you wanted to be aware of, or maybe there's a story, maybe there's a reason why. Maybe they have a certain type of freight that they're moving that's making it look like they have they're running more billable miles than they can, when in reality they're doing everything right on the up and up. I've seen it both ways, and I've seen it both ways. But I will tell you, more often than not, you need to trust the data and the insights. It lends to be
There's something there.
More often, there's the conversations had, and you walk away being like, I probably should be a little more cautious than I was before.
Yeah.
And
That's the key.
Yeah.
That's the key. You never know what everyone has a story too. Not everything's going to be rosy, but the fact that you can pick those things up and find ways to protect yourself is huge. So,
And you think about proactive communication, setting expectations in any relationship. Proactive communication, setting expectations reduces conflict because of unmet expectations down the road. Having the conversation with, this carrier who before you didn't know he had the broker authority under his name and cross town or whatever. You find out now he's got broker authority, or you find out now he's got leased on drivers. Just having the conversation about, hey, I'm aware of this now. Hey, can we make sure that my freight doesn't end up in your broker side? Like, let's just be clear. Like, I know you have broker authority now. Like, my freight can't be brokered. If you can't cover it, your truck breaks down. Don't be a hero. I don't need you to be the hero. And that happens. Like, carriers want to be the hero. They don't want to give the freight back.
and their intentions are good.
But what they don't understand is the liability that's created when that
Yes.
happens, right?
Exactly.
And that's an education. We do that all the time. Like, carriers just say, man, I was just trying to do the right thing. I get it. But sometimes bad things can happen when you do the right thing. And that's where we say, hey, look, it's better for you to give the freight back than to do something that's outside the contract that introduces risk not only to themselves. They don't realize they're introducing risk to themselves because their insurance isn't set up to cover another carrier hauling this load that was tendered to them as a motor carrier. It brings risk to the broker, it brings risk to the shipper, it brings risk all along the chain of custody there. And we've had great opportunities to educate a lot of carriers on that risk. And again, like you said, it's coming from a good place sometimes.
Uh-huh.
And most guys get it. Once you explain it to them, then they get it. And it's okay if trucks break down. And we also work whenever we see these reports come in about, people frustrated because a 1 truck carrier didn't show up because his truck broke down. Dude, trucks break down. We don't allow those reports to get published in Highway because we know how hard it is for these guys. Like, we have friends that are in the trucking industry. People that, we financed for a long time. Like, we care about their outcome. And we're not going to allow, like, something bad happened. The truck broke down. They hit, these things happen. People get sick.
Yeah.
People get sick. You gotta actually physically move this stuff. It's not just like, software. And so we want to make sure that small carriers' reputations are not damaged just because something bad happened. That, it stinks for the broker, right? They have to go find another carrier and because they fell off. But like, that's the nature of why we're compensated on the broker freight community, is to provide that stability when a small carrier, something happens and they can't make it, to go find another one. That's our job, right? And so we shouldn't punish people because of their things that happen in the world that cause breakdowns.
I agree. Well, I'm glad we're able to do this. And I think our agents, they needed to hear exactly what Highway is, even the goals that are taking place in the future. But I think also, too, we're talking about maybe having a Zoom discussion and having our agents join in there and asking questions back and forth to you. You're cool with that?
I love it, man. I love talking to the users because the feedback is always valuable. I learn more about the product when I'm talking to users who are like, hey, this stinks. Like when I hit the back button, this happens. I'm like, I never thought about that. So that's the kind of stuff that like we learn from and grow from. And so yeah, I'm excited. Tell them I'm ready for them to bring the heat. I know they're gonna come out.
You might get some heat.
Yeah,
Here's the thing. I mean, I remember when we changed from CMS to Revenova, and you know what? You're going through using a new tool. It's challenging. You have your ups and downs, or it's like, oh, it's cumbersome, whatever it is. But over time, you know what? You get used to it. And you just kind of work through it. I think the same thing too. I mean, yes, we've had challenges here.
Yeah.
You know, with the onboarding of Highway, and you know what? There's been some frustrations, but the more we use it, and the more we fine tune things, get the right carriers of the system that are approved, I believe things will be easier, and it's just gonna be work in the background, like you said, like your firewall that's doing stuff, and you're not getting affected too much by it.
Yeah.
Fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also us learning your business. You know, we respond, you know, there are things that we know that we absolutely want to do, right? In that highway, there's certain protections and certain data analysis that we're doing that we know we want to do. But then there's another layer of here of like molding highway to fit your business. And so we've absolutely made changes based on Mark and Anita's feedback, like specifically around the inter-Canadian carriers and that process, and some great feedback about how you all view the world, right? And the things that you all know, because you move a lot more Canadian freight than we have.
Yeah.
Right? And so we make sure that our process is malleable, like it can fit around what you want it to do. Like, and that's, you know, there's some things that like are ground truths that we care about, but then there's a lot of things up here that we want to make sure makes great sense for SPI and its agents, and be responsive to feedback. And things are going to change. Like Mike, the you know, as things change, as SPI grows and brings more agents and moves and does more different types of modes of freight, like we want to make sure that we're meeting those needs not only today but in the future. And we will always, again, we talk a lot about owning the outcome at Highway. We don't just deliver software and say it's perfect. Hey, it works. Like, you know, it's software, it's workflow. Workflows change and workflows break, and workflows have to be amended to make for changing circumstances. And so we fully understand that, and that's something that I care deeply about personally. I write a lot of the code that goes in Highway, and I already got some code that I'm going to write for feedback we got here. Like I'll write it on the plane tomorrow, because you know how much I care about SPI. You guys took a bet on me when I was starting out at TriumphPay, and like you all were good to me, and so like I will not sleep I mean after we talked to Freightwaves and you're like, hey, we got these 6 things we need you to go fix. I worked on it that night because I care that much about this company, because you all been so good to me.